They were immigrants who found love in America.
When they saw each other, they each saw home.
They were really in it together, like they love each other.
This was the family unit that they craved.
But there are some things no family should have to go through.
The children had not been picked up.
They went to the apartment, but no one answered.
That's when they called 911.
One down, in the kitchen.
She was laying in pools of blood.
There was some obvious evidence of struggle in the residence.
Who would have wanted her dead?
She really didn't have any enemies.
But she did have secrets.
You guys are sleeping together.
He was very jealous and controlling.
Then she asked him to leave.
She feared that he would retaliate.
Asked whether he had killed her. He never denied it.
But he didn't admit it either.
The demon, they just took over a black dog.
April 17th, 2018. It's Tuesday evening in Silver Spring, Maryland, a DC suburb that sometimes feels like a city in its own right.
It's a bustling, like, metropolitan feel. There's a main strip along Georgia Avenue with a lot of shops and places to eat. It's a very fun environment.
You have the city, and then you have the suburbs right next door. So you have the best of both worlds.
It's also culturally diverse.
You have individuals from all over the world, different cultures, different languages, and all in this very small area.
Ethiopian families, Haitian families, and a lot of Asian families as well. Very multicultural.
And 34-year-old Alice Dennis and her husband, Ruel Dempster, fit right in.
The family had migrated from Liberia. They had 2 children that are like tweens, getting ready to embark on becoming teenagers here.
Even Ruel's parents came over from Liberia.
And at around 6 that evening, they go pick up their grandchildren from an after-school program.
You haven't heard from them?
They received a phone call that the children had not been picked up. So the grandparents picked them up.
Ruel's parents hoped that it was just some sort of mix-up.
Possibly Ruel and Alice just simply forgot or lost track of time.
Unable to reach their son and daughter-in-law, Ruel's parents drive over to the couple's apartment.
Ruel's parents lived just blocks from he and Alice.
They knocked on the door and no one answered.
Ruel? Alice? Are you in there?
No one's answering, but there's music inside the residence. Loud music.
Ruel, Alice!
They knew that something was off.
Although they were both Liberian immigrants, Alice Dennis and Ruel Dempster met in the United States.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
When Alice and Ruel first met, it was almost love at first sight. They were able to spend time together at work every day. And doing something mundane turned into something really fun.
Ruel was immediately captivated by Alice.
She was a very vibrant, happy-go-lucky, life of the party type of personality.
To know Alice was to love Alice. You couldn't help yourself. Her smile was infectious.
And Alice felt the same way about Ruel.
He was charming. And when they saw each other, they each saw home. They understood the culture. This was a man that she could foresee being her husband.
You're vibing, it feels good. It feels like, you know, a stronger connection.
After a few years of dating, Alice and Ruel married.
When they thought they were ready for children, that's exactly what they did. They had their first child, a son, and the world changed for both of them.
The growing family settled into an apartment building across from where Ruel's parents lived.
I think that it is helpful to have that community, to have that support system, especially when you have children.
Then, 2 years after their son was born, the couple had another child, this time a daughter.
This was the family they craved, that they both desired.
They were living the American dream.
But as much as she loved her family, Alice had a dream of her own.
She had certain aspirations, and one of those was becoming a certified nurse assistant.
So Alice enrolled in a nursing assistant program.
And after graduation, Alice found work as a home health aide.
She took care of people and was very hardworking.
Soon, her hard work paid off.
Alice became the breadwinner of the family, and Ruel was there to support her.
Don't forget, set the oven to 350.
Don't worry, I got it.
All right.
Okay.
Love you.
Love you.
He wanted his wife to succeed. He would stay home and take care of the children. It was what worked for them.
She had children and a career that was thriving, and a man that she loved and supported her dreams.
This was a good situation. What more could she ask for?
But now, after failing to pick up their kids from school, Alice and Ruel aren't answering their door.
Call her.
Or their phones.
No one's answering, but there's music inside the residence. And Alice's car was parked there. So that was bizarre.
The next morning, still, no one had been able to contact Alice or Ruel. So when the grandparents got the kids to school, they asked the school to contact police.
I have a student here whose grandfather brought her in this morning. The parents weren't home and they can't get access to the apartment and they don't know where the parents are.
Okay, and I'm sure we dispatched as soon as possible.
When officers arrive at the apartment for a welfare check, they find the same thing Ruel's parents did.
The doors were locked, the windows were secure, and of course, they noticed that Alice's vehicle was still parked there. So that raised a level of concern.
The same loud music is still coming from inside, too.
Patrol ultimately made entry into the apartment with the assistance of property management.
When they entered, they got their first clue as to what had happened.
One down, one down, one down. Kitchen.
Liberian immigrants Alice Dennis and her husband Ruel Dempster had built a great life for themselves and their 2 children.
Alice was working as a certified nursing assistant while Ruel stayed home with the kids.
He was supporting her in her dreams, and the children were healthy, they were thriving.
But now police conducting a welfare check at the couple's apartment have just made a horrific discovery.
One down, one down, one down. Kitchen.
They immediately saw a female on the floor suffering from what appeared to be traumatic injuries.
She was laying in pools of blood.
It was clear that she was beyond help.
I mean, I don't know that we need fire rescue, quite frankly. No.
It was clear that she had obvious trauma to her upper torso.
This woman was stabbed multiple times.
So officers secured the residence and notified homicide.
We're trying to get tape and just tape everything off.
When detectives arrive on the scene, they start out by examining the body.
She had one particularly large stab injury to her neck that was clean through to the bone, and frankly, an injury that nearly decapitated her.
When you see the severity of the injuries, it just shows that perhaps the attacker had some personal connection to the victim.
And it's clear from the scene that she didn't go down without a fight.
The house was turned upside down.
There was a lot of evidence of there being a fight or a struggle in the residence.
Detectives are also able to determine that the woman is Alice.
She was wearing scrubs and a lanyard with her ID badge.
She clearly had either been going to work or coming home from work.
But who would want to hurt her? Hoping for answers, the detectives turn to Alice and Ruel's neighbors.
We don't know anything about Alice when we get there. So we have to talk to neighbors, talk to family, talk to friends, and try to understand who she was.
Unfortunately, they learned that Alice and her husband mostly kept to themselves.
Do you know them next door?
We don't really know them, but I know their children.
Talking to people in and about the area is really important. Sometimes they don't have any information, but you don't know until you talk to them.
Monday night, did you ever hear anything unusual or?
No.
Didn't hear anything?
No.
However, one neighbor had seen Alice outside her apartment late Saturday night.
I was coming from the club with my husband, and she was outside sitting in the stairs.
She was obviously upset.
Could this incident have something to do with her death?
Unfortunately, when the detectives ask why Alice was upset, her neighbor has no idea.
I don't know anything else.
Okay, and?
I mean, we just see each other. I don't even know her name, but she just goes, "Oh, hi, how are you? You know, your daughter's getting big," stuff like that, but that's it.
Still, the canvas does reveal something useful.
We identified some security cameras that we knew we were going to want to get footage from.
So, before leaving the complex, detectives stop by the management office, and they agree to send the footage over.
You could narrow down that timeline, that window of what happened and when it happened.
It could even include footage of the killer coming or going from the apartment.
After arranging for the apartment management to send them the footage, the detectives sit down with Ruel's mother, who has arrived outside the apartment.
Why don't you have a seat in my car? Figure out what's going on.
She was devastated to learn that her daughter-in-law was dead.
These two families were interconnected. Alice and Ruel were special to each side of the family, and Ruel's family was just as devastated learning something like this could happen to Alice.
But Alice's mother-in-law also has an urgent question.
Where is Ruel?
They hadn't heard from him. His phone was going straight to voicemail.
Hoping for clues, the detectives have Ruel's mom go back to the beginning.
She said she didn't have any idea anything was wrong until the school called her. The school said they needed to come get the children.
It's not like them not to call.
Right.
They picked up the kids, figured they'd drop them off later, and everything would be fine.
But they never heard anything from Ruel or Alice.
I told him, I said, look, this is getting serious.
This wasn't like anything that Alice or Ruel had ever done before.
And the next morning, still unable to get a hold of Ruel or Alice, they'd ask the school to call the police.
Because according to Ruel's mother, they were afraid something had happened.
They argue a lot.
In fact, Ruel's mother said recently she had to break up a fight between them.
Oh, you're sick and tired? You tired? You going to the bathroom?
Ruel Dempster's mother has just told detectives investigating the murder of his wife, Alice Dennis, that the couple had been having arguments.
She admitted that Ruel and Alice were having some marital issues.
Apparently, Ruel had even gotten into some legal trouble, too.
He had a weapons. He was still on federal parole for that crime.
But she says it was nothing that they couldn't work out, nothing to lead to Alice winding up dead in their home.
Has it ever been physical that you know of, or that Alice has told you, or Rules told you?
No.
However, Ruel's mother admits that she has had to step in at times.
Including a few days prior, early on Saturday morning.
Hey, who was that, huh? No! Where you trying to go? Huh?
I just don't want this no more.
No!
Leave me alone.
No, you can't go in there.
I'm sick of it.
I don't care.
She called me, we talked, I would say around 1-something, 2 in the morning.
Alice had to call her in-laws just so she could put some separation between herself and Ruel. And his parents immediately, because they lived just a few blocks away, came right to the apartment.
Oh, yeah, no, man, that's so simple. Yeah. Oh, you're sick and tired? You going to pants? You tell you going to pants? Come on, Ruel. No, Ruel. Calm down. You come up here. Let's go.
They came in, they talked with their son, and calmed things down.
I made a statement that they need, counseling.
Still, Ruel's mother couldn't imagine that any of these issues would have led to Alice's death.
Okay. Well, where do you think Ro would be?
I don't know. I really have no idea.
To get a possible lead on Ruel, the detectives subpoena his cell phone records once they get back to the station.
They also subpoenaed Alice's records, hoping to get a more complete picture of the couple's relationship.
Cell phones play a huge part of just about every investigation. We always have to get a search warrant, and that takes time.
Then, while waiting to hear back from the couple's cell phone provider, the detectives reach out to Alice and Ruel's friends and coworkers.
We talked to people just to understand the victimology, understand what type of person she was.
All the people that they speak to just repeat the same things over and over again.
She really didn't have any enemies.
But then a woman named Maria Barnes contacts detectives.
Glass.
How do you know Alice?
She's my best friend that we worked together in 2005.
Okay.
And we've been friends since then.
Maria enlightened police that, yes, everything from the outside looking in was copacetic. But being Alice's best friend, Maria knew the inside tea, if you will.
Maria confirms what Ruel's mother said, that a lot of the couple's issues stemmed from Ruel's stint in jail.
When he was incarcerated, she always put herself second.
She worked jobs. She took extra shifts. She did whatever she had to do to keep that family unit running. And now she was tired.
She wanted it to work for the sake of her children.
It feels like a constant race to make ends meet.
And even after he was out of jail, Ruel was little help.
She needed him to get a job and to take care of the family, and he wasn't doing that.
Alice was frustrated in her marriage.
And despite Alice being the couple's primary provider, Ruel still insisted on calling the shots.
It might be cultural, I don't know, but she always kept him as the head of the household.
He was very jealous and controlling. He was constantly trying to control Alice.
And contrary to what Ruel's mother claimed, Maria says the relationship was violent.
Maria has had a front row seat to the violent tendencies.
But she never told me he hit her.
According to Maria, she didn't have to.
Sometimes she would have bruises and marks on her body.
Maria tells the detectives that Alice had finally stood up for herself and asked him to leave.
When did she ask him to leave?
Maybe a month ago, I think.
Did he leave?
Yeah, he wasn't there.
But Maria said Alice eventually let Ruel return.
The kids were sick, and she said he came. She allowed him to come in because she had to go to work.
Maria says the couple was soon squabbling again.
He would take her keys, so she moved on.
But according to Maria, Alice was determined to leave permanently.
Alice was ready to end this relationship and get away from Ruel.
She was in the process of moving on.
And she started seeing somebody else.
Alice Dennis's friend, Maria Barnes, has just told Silver Spring detectives that Alice was planning to leave her husband, Ruel Dempster.
I just don't want this no more. No, you can't go in this. I'm sick of it. I don't care.
Alice decided to move on with her life because her home was completely dysfunctional, abusive, and toxic.
And according to her friend Maria, Alice wasn't just moving on. She was moving on with a new man.
You know who she was seeing?
His name is Caleb Weaver.
It was a relatively new relationship for her. It had only developed recently prior to her death, maybe a month or two before.
This man had been helping her cope with being the caregiver to 2 children and running herself ragged, trying to work multiple shifts to keep up with the bills and keep up with her husband.
So now detectives are wondering, had Ruel found out about Caleb?
Or had Caleb grown frustrated waiting for Alice to kick her husband to the curb?
Could this man have been in a jealous rage and also done something to Ruel?
The jealous boyfriend is obviously always going to be a likely suspect.
After talking to Maria, detectives take a look into Caleb Weaver's background.
He had no significant rap sheet or any red flags indicating a history of violence.
But that doesn't mean he couldn't be involved somehow.
We want to talk to this person and see what he will disclose and what we can corroborate about his relationship and the development of that relationship with Ms. Dennis.
When the detectives bring Caleb in for questioning, he doesn't deny being involved with Alice.
I'm the seeker.
The what?
The seeker. She was messing with a little bit.
He said they've only been dating for a few weeks, though.
And how'd you meet her?
I already knew her from the neighborhood.
He happened to become her confidant.
She did confide in him about long-term abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, assaults. Just a very difficult home life. And he felt compassion for her.
She was always being the supporter. So this was finally a place where she could kind of lean on someone else.
But when detectives asked Caleb if he was upset that her husband was still around, Caleb insists he wasn't.
He said that she made it clear to him that she and Ruel were no longer in a relationship.
To my knowledge, he wasn't even supposed to be coming over here. Only reason she let him over here is so she could watch the kids while she go to work.
And according to Caleb, Alice was about to file for divorce.
She realized that she could not salvage this relationship, and she wanted more for herself.
Okay, so you guys are sleeping together.
Yeah.
Okay. Sleep at your apartment or her apartment?
Although, rather than spend the night, Caleb said Alice would mostly come by in the afternoon.
So she would stop at your place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because the kids would still be at home with the club.
That's where the kids were when Ruel's parents picked them up on the day Alice and Ruel went missing.
Which leads detectives to their next question. When Caleb last saw Alice.
He said that the last time was 2 days before her body was discovered.
He met her over at a friend's house on Saturday night, after Ruel's parents broke up the argument between the couple.
So you're with Alice from Saturday night to Sunday morning?
Yes.
And according to Caleb, Alice's fight with Ruel was about him.
He kept telling her, like, tell the kids who you messing with, what's his name and all that.
He's suspecting that she's cheating.
Yeah.
But he can't figure out who.
Yep.
Ruel had gone through her text messages.
Caleb said Alice owned up to the infidelity, but had given Ruel a false name.
She told him he was messing with some guy named Jerome or something like that.
She feared that he would retaliate with violence.
Still, Caleb says that after they spent most of the day together that Sunday, Alice had gone home at around 6 to make dinner for her kids.
But he said he did speak to her on the phone again on Monday evening.
And according to Caleb, Alice said something during that phone call that seems ominous in hindsight.
She said something happens to me, he did it.
Caleb said at the time he thought she was just kidding around.
But now that Alice is dead, the detectives suspect she was deathly serious.
Thank you for your time.
Police know after speaking with Caleb that they need to find Ruel.
When the detectives get Ruel and Alice's phone records, they prove to be a dead end.
From the report, it was clear that both phones had been turned off since the murder.
We could not locate him by using his cell site technology.
Still, the detectives keep trying.
Any possible connection to him, they were calling and trying to find out, have you talked to him? Have you heard from him?
They also pull Ruel's criminal record.
Ruel had been on parole, federal parole, for a weapons charge.
But that's not the only thing they find on his record.
He was charged with manslaughter.
He had been suspected in the death of a police officer.
Detectives investigating the murder of Alice Dennis have learned that her husband Ruel Dempster's rap sheet includes a decade-old manslaughter charge.
He was the driver in a traffic incident in which he fled and he led police on a high-speed pursuit.
During the pursuit, one officer stepped out of his car and was run over by another driver.
He was tried under the theory that his fleeing the police was essentially the domino that caused the other dominoes to fall.
The case went to trial, but Ruel was acquitted.
The jury essentially found that his actions were too attenuated from the actual death of the officer.
Then, a few years later, he'd been picked up on a firearms charge.
Ruel pled guilty on that charge and spent 3 years in federal prison.
He might have been a little bit violent before, but 3 years behind bars can really escalate some of these activities and behaviors.
Did that mean Ruel was a killer?
Come take a look at this.
The key to the mystery may be in the security footage the detectives received from the couple's apartment complex.
In this case, we had the good fortune of having surveillance video.
Following the surveillance video, we saw Ruel leave the home on the morning of the 17th with his children. He took them to the roadway at the intersection of the complex, and he walked back to his home.
In the video, he was wearing a black hoodie and some light-colored pants.
Within 1 hour of him coming back from walking his children, you see him leaving again with the same hoodie, but different pants.
He's also carrying a small duffel bag.
He walked in the same direction, but he made a right as if he was walking to a bus stop. There were several bus stops along the roadway.
Essentially, he drops off the map for the next few weeks.
Fast forwarding through the rest of the video, it's clear Ruel never returns to the apartment, and Alice is never seen leaving it.
There were no signs of anyone else approaching the apartment either.
So we assumed that he packed some things after killing Alice, left the home, got in a bus, and never came back.
Whether he had a weapon in that duffel bag or not, we don't know for certain.
But the detectives are certain of one thing.
There was a bunch of factors that when you looked at them in conjunction, made it clear that Ruel committed this murder.
The surveillance video, the pending breakup, the history of abuse, and Ruel's suspicion that Alice was seeing someone else all pointed to him as the killer.
And the mere fact that he was trying not to be found is also suspicious when your wife...
More than enough for an arrest warrant.
The arrest warrant goes into a computer database so that any law enforcement officer could apprehend the person.
News of the arrest warrant also generates several tips.
First was from a man in Baltimore who said he was Ruel's cousin.
This murder happened on Tuesday. Tuesday afternoon, about 2 o'clock, he showed up in Baltimore.
I was like, that's really random what he did.
And according to his cousin, The next morning, Ruel took a rideshare to the bus station. Based on the tip, the detectives focused their efforts on Virginia.
Several days went by, and we continued to work with other agencies to help us locate Ruel.
But the trail grows cold.
He knew how to disappear. This man used burner phones. He was on Snapchat with disappearing messages. There was no real way to pinpoint Ruel's location.
Until after more than a week of fruitless searching, the detectives finally get a lead when Ruel's brother makes a surprise visit to the police station.
Ruel was sending his brother messages.
He called from apps, so they were unable to determine where he was calling from.
So do you know where he is?
No, I don't. One time he said he was in Minnesota, then the next time he said he was in Montreal.
Those were both places with a big Liberian community.
Wherever Ruel was, what he said on the calls was disturbing.
This family member said to me, he sounds like he's mentally in distress. He did not sound like himself.
Maybe he is mentally unstable. Maybe he had a mental breakdown.
It just sounded really disturbing every time he calls. It's like he just wouldn't stop talking about the devil.
He felt his body had been possessed by Lucifer, and he didn't know what to do.
I mean, I told him to turn his app in, and I just don't think he's gonna do that.
Well, let us know if he contacts you again.
With that information, we reached out to the Canadian Border Patrol to assist us in locating him.
But then another tip comes in.
He reached out to a friend who heard that Alice was killed.
This friend straight up asked if he was responsible for Alice's death, and he said nope.
And he told her, to lose his number, erase the conversation, take care of yourself. We're never going to talk again.
Instead, his friend gave the number to police.
And the phone number that he used, we were able to determine was registered to Mexico.
Maryland detectives investigating the murder of 34-year-old Alice Dennis have learned that her husband, Ruel Dempster, may have fled to Mexico.
While on the run, he had contacted a friend, which eventually led police to trace some of his calls.
The phone number that he used was a registered number from Mexico.
Tipped off by Ruel's friend, the detectives alert law enforcement on both sides of the border.
On May 7th, he's caught by Mexican police after 3 weeks completely on the lam.
He denied being Ruel Dempster, but they sent me a photograph of him. And I said, that's indeed Ruel Dempster. We got him.
Ruel was immediately detained and extradited back to Silver Spring, Maryland.
More than 2 months after the murder, the detectives are finally able to sit down with Ruel.
He asked what he was charged with. I said murder.
And you left her there. That is how it looks, okay?
The word murder came out, and he became fixated on whether it was premeditated or not. Because how can you charge me with murder if it's not premeditated?
It wasn't premeditated.
I said, well, I'm not saying you planned any of this out.
You stumbled across some information that Alice probably didn't want you to see, and you lost it.
But Ruel says it wasn't like that at all.
Asked whether or not he had killed her. He never denied it. He never admitted it.
When he was confronted with the evidence against him, he blamed someone else, like any coward would. He blamed spiritual warfare he blamed demons in his head.
He settled on the notion that spiritual or spirits or something like that was sort of the guiding force behind his behavior.
The demons, they just took over.
But then he started to backtrack from that just a little bit.
He says at one point that he doesn't remember what happened.
Oh, I lost it like I blacked out.
But his actions after the murder speak otherwise.
He had the awareness to nearly successfully flee the country, and he already was thinking about his defense and how this was not a premeditated murder.
We sort of went round and round and round.
He gave a nearly 6-hour meandering interview.
And we got some good information out of him to the extent where he at least tacitly admitted to committing the crime without saying he committed the crime.
Even without an explicit confession, the prosecutors are confident they can secure a conviction.
We had a strong circumstantial case based on Ruel's behavior before the murder, which showed the violence, the controlling behavior, the jealousy, the anger, and the fights.
He wanted to portray this persona of I'm a strong man and I'm in control of my home. But when he lost that control, it was hard for him to deal with it.
And that was before he found out that Alice was seeing someone else.
Ruel had gone through her phone, had found text messages, and had become very jealous and controlling. That quickly devolved into a fight between Alice and Ruel. That fight became so bad that Alice called Ruel's parents.
Ruel's parents were able to calm things down, temporarily.
That was the same night neighbors saw Alice crying on the stairs outside of the apartment.
Alice left for the night, and then Ruel's parents took the children.
She'd spent the night, and most of the next day, with her new boyfriend, Caleb.
She stayed out to kind of stay away and give him time to cool down, and the grandparents continued to take care of the children.
And she hadn't gone home until Sunday evening.
Alice assumed everything was back to normal.
But she was wrong. That Tuesday morning, as he walked their kids to the bus stop, Ruel made a fateful decision.
She made it clear to him that she no longer wanted to be with him, and he was not ready to allow her to move on. Because in his mind, that's his wife, his property.
And when he got back to the apartment, he made sure she would never leave him.
Ruel, what are you doing? What?
You gonna cheat on me? What? You think you're gonna just mess around on me and get away with it?
She's savagely killed, and then he tries to make it across the Mexican border.
Ruel thought that he was smarter than the police and that he could kill her and just move on with life.
But instead, Ruel would be going to prison for 40 years.
He ended up taking a plea deal.
40 years is the maximum he could have received for a second degree. We certainly would have tried the case on a first degree premeditation theory, but there would have been challenges. And we also spared their children having to relive, the events.
I always feel like it's better to not re-traumatize them by making them testify. So, am I satisfied with the plea deal for the children's sake? Yes, but it doesn't take away what happened to Alice.
And it doesn't make what comes after any easier.
People have to make some really big decisions about how do we move forward? How do we grieve? How do we help the kids grieve?
They've lost their mom and their father. That's a hard blow for a child.
Unfortunately, domestic violence has no zip code. It's important that people realize that Alice's story could be almost any woman that you know.
Including a loving mother doing her very best to not only raise her children, but help others as well.
Alice Dennis was a life cut far too short. I don't know how many times we have to hear on the news or watch in a television show to hear about yet another woman dying at the hands of an abusive partner.
What happened to Alice Dennis was just the ultimate manifestation of how bad it gets when domestic violence continues to go unchecked.
Abuse is never okay. If you or someone you love is in an abusive relationship, there is help available. Call the Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE.
Does not lie, but the man staring into it does. In the soft glow of a California morning, 1979, the man who called himself Dr. Gerald Barnes adjusted his stethoscope. It was a prop, though a functional one. To the world, it was a symbol of healing, of authority, of a life dedicated to the preservation of pulse and breath. To Gerald Barnbaum, it was the final piece of a costume he had been perfecting since he left Chicago in a cloud of disgrace. He liked the weight of the lab coat. It had a specific stiffness, a clinical white that suggested purity. He practiced his doctor's smile in the glass worm, reassuring, just the right amount of paternal concern. He wasn't just a pharmacist with a revoked license anymore. He was an actor who had found the role of a lifetime, and the stage was the Pacific Southwest Medical Group. 400 miles away, the real Dr. Gerald Barnes was waking up in Stockton, unaware that his name, his hard-earned credentials, and his very soul had been harvested by a ghost. Chapter 1, The Assistant's Shadow. Rick D'Alessandro liked his boss. That was the problem. In the busy hallways of the Orange County Clinic, Dr. Barnes was a breath of fresh air. He was a likable little guy. As Rick would often describe him, quick with a joke, easy to talk to, and possessed of a charismatic energy that made patients feel better before he even examined them. Morning, Rick, Barnes said, breezing past the reception desk with a stack of charts. Beautiful day to save some lives, isn't it? Rick smiled, checking the clipboard. We've got a full house, Doc, 25 scheduled, and the walk-ins are already lining up. The more the merrier, Barnes replied, his eyes twinkling behind scholarly spectacles. Rick watched him go, a small frown creeping onto his face. There was something about the way Barnes handled the more complex cases, a certain hesitation, a reliance on routine prescriptions. But in a high-volume clinic, efficiency was king. Barnes was efficient. He was the director. He was the man with the answers. Or so everyone thought. Chapter 2, The December Chill. December 26, 1979. The holiday spirit was a fading echo, replaced by the gray reality of a winter morning. John Mackenzie walked into the clinic, and even from across the room, Rick could see the man was vibrating with exhaustion. At 29, Mackenzie should have been in the prime of his life, but he looked like a candle guttering in the wind. His skin was sallow, his eyes sunken, and his gait was unsteady. "I don't feel right, Rick," Mackenzie whispered, his voice dry as parchment. "Thirsty, so thirsty, and dizzy. It's like the floor won't stay still." Rick ushered him into exam room 3. "The doctor will see you in a moment. John, hang in there." When Barnes entered the room, he didn't see a man on the brink of a diabetic coma. He saw a script to be followed. He listened to the complaints: excessive urination, dry mouth, the loss of equilibrium, inner ear disturbance. Barnes pronounced with the practiced ease of a veteran clinician. A touch of vertigo happens after the holiday stress. Diet, the usual. He scribbled on a pad. An anti-vertigo drug. Something to stop the spinning. But the thirst, Doc, Mackenzie asked, clutching a paper cup of water like it was a holy relic. "Your body is reacting to the imbalance," Barnes said, patting him on the shoulder. "Take the pills. We'll run some blood work just to be safe, but you'll be fine by New Year's." Barnes sent him home. He didn't check for the sweet scent of ketones on the man's breath. He didn't notice the classic signs of a body eating itself. He had 39 other patients to see. He had a role to play. And John Mackenzie was just a bit player in the grand drama of Gerald Barnbaum's ego. Chapter 3, 1200. The lab results came back the next day. Dr. Barnes was off, enjoying the perks of his stolen prestige. Rick D'Alessandro was the one who opened the folder. He expected the usual slightly elevated cholesterol, maybe a minor infection. Instead, he saw a number that made his heart stop. Glucose, 1,200 milligrams DL. Normal was 80 to 100. 1,200 was a death sentence. It was a level so high the blood was practically syrup. Oh, God, Rick whispered. He didn't wait for a supervisor. He didn't wait for Barnes. He grabbed the phone and dialed Mackenzie's number. Ring, ring, ring. No answer. He called the emergency contact and ex-wife. She hadn't seen him. He called the other numbers on the chart. Silence. A cold dread settled in Rick's stomach. He looked at the chart again. Barnes had prescribed an anti-vertigo medication. He had sent a man an active, acute diabetic crisis home with a pill for dizziness. I need the police, Rick told the dispatcher, his voice trembling. Garden Grove PD. We have a patient. I think he's in danger. Chapter 4. The kitchen floor. The officers broke the door in. The apartment was quiet, the air heavy with the stillness of a life interrupted. They found John Mackenzie in the kitchen. He was lying on the floor, his body cold, his eyes staring at a ceiling he couldn't see. In his hand, clutched tightly like a failed talisman, was the prescription Dr. Barnes had given him. The anti-vertigo drug. The 29-year-old had collapsed into a coma and died alone. His body starving for insulin while he followed the expert advice of a man who didn't know the difference between a balance disorder and a metabolic catastrophe. When Rick heard the news, the grief was quickly overtaken by a burning, incandescent rage. A doctor might make a mistake, but this felt like a void where knowledge should have been. Rick sat in the quiet of the empty clinic that evening. He looked at the framed diploma on Barnes's wall. He looked at the medical board registration. Something felt hollow. Something felt wrong. He picked up the phone and called the medical board in Sacramento. I need to verify the identity of a Dr. Gerald Barnes, Rick said. Could you fax over his identification photo and file? The fax machine hummed to life. The paper slid out, inch by agonizing inch. Rick watched as the image formed. The man in the photo was older, different features, a different bone structure. The address listed was in Stockton, 400 miles away. Rick looked at the photo, then at the empty chair in the director's office. "You're not him," Rick whispered to the shadows. "Who the hell are you?" Chapter 5. The Pharmacist of Chicago. The investigation into the man who would be king of the clinic revealed a history built on layers of deception. Before he was Dr. Barnes, he was Gerald Barnbaum. In Chicago, he had been a pharmacist, a man who understood the chemistry of medicine but lacked the ethics of it. He had been caught in a Medicaid scam, a greedy little grift that cost him his license. But Barnbaum was a performer. He had been a theater student in college. He knew how to project a character. If he couldn't be a pharmacist, he would be something better, something more powerful. He had called the medical board, posing as the real Dr. Barnes. He told them he had lost his duplicate license and was opening a clinic in Los Angeles. They, trusting the name and the professional tone, mailed him the credentials without a second thought. It was that easy. A phone call, a lie, and a white coat. On August 8th, 1980, the curtain finally fell. The police arrived not to discuss a patient, but to escort the leading man to a cell. The charge: practicing medicine without a license. And, more importantly, manslaughter. But as Gerald Barnbaum sat in the back of the cruiser, he wasn't crying. He was already thinking about his next role. Chapter 6, the second act. Prison was supposed to be the end of the story. For the family of John Mackenzie, 3 years felt like a slap in the face. For the real Dr. Barnes, the damage to his name was a wound that wouldn't heal. But Gerald Barnbaum was a man of habit. 18 months later, he was out on good behavior. He walked out of the prison gates, looked at the California sun, and realized he didn't know how to be anyone else. He didn't go back to Chicago. He didn't find a trade. He went to a different city, found a different clinic, and put on a different white coat. He became Dr. Gerald Barnes again. He even got married. Lisa Roberts thought she had found the perfect husband. He was a doctor, a provider, a romantic who showered her with flowers and took her to concerts. He earned a six-figure salary. He was the medical director of a Los Angeles facility. I'm so proud of you, Gerald, she would say as she kissed him goodbye in the morning. It's all for you, darling, he would reply. He lived this life for years. He saw patients. He ordered tests. He performed physicals for FBI agents. He was so good at the role that even the government's premier law enforcement agency didn't check the credentials of the man sticking a tongue depressor into their throats. Until a Christmas party in 1996. Rick D'Alessandro was there. He had moved on with his life, but he never forgot the face of the man who killed John Mackenzie. He was standing near the punch bowl when he saw a familiar, likable little guy wearing a name tag. Hi, I'm Dr. Barnes. The world stopped. Rick felt the blood rush to his ears. It had been 16 years, but the mask was identical. Hi, Rick, the man said, his voice as smooth as silk. How are you doing? Rick stared at him, his fists clenching. Well, Gerald, I'm not doing too well, because you're doing the same thing you did back in the 70s. The doctor didn't flinch. He gave a small, sad smile. Well, you know, Rick, this is all just a big mistake. He walked away, disappeared into the crowd, and then disappeared from the city. But the FBI was now on the trail. Chapter 7, The Highway Ghost. While Barnbound was a predator of the clinic, a different kind of architect was emerging in the heart of the Midwest. David Brankel didn't wear a white coat. He wore expensive suits. He drove a black BMW. He was a businessman, a developer, a man with a vision. In Bloomington, Indiana, Brankel was the man to know. He rented an office from Phil and Bonnie Sperry, claiming to run an architectural and construction firm called ACR. architecture, construction. And what's there for? David, Phil Sperry asked one afternoon over coffee. Brankle smiled, a smooth, practiced expression that reached his eyes but didn't warm them. Results, Phil, always results. But the R stood for robbery. Brankle was a man of dualities. Sunday through Wednesday, he was a family man in Vincennes, living in a rented house with a wife and a young son. Thursday through Saturday, he was a ghost on the interstate. He would drive his black BMW, a car he couldn't afford, to grocery store banks tucked inside Winn-Dixies and Measures. He used a simple disguise, a fishing hat, a mustache, a pair of tan coveralls. He would walk up to the teller and hand over a note. I have a gun. Be quiet. Go home alive. He was efficient. He was calm. He was the interstate bank mart bandit IBM. And he was driving a path of financial destruction across 6 states. He had an accomplice, a woman named Donna Hewins. She was the Bonnie to his Clyde, a waitress he met at a club who fell for the thrill and the dapper suits. She sat in the idling BMW while David walked into the stores, a scanner in his hand, listening to the police frequencies. He was playing a game with the world. He was the successful entrepreneur by day and the most prolific bank robber in the region by night. He believed he was smarter than the detectives, smarter than the FBI, and certainly smarter than the people he scammed. Chapter 8, Operation Intercept. Detective Larry Duncan of the Louisville Metro Police was a man of maps. He sat in his office, staring at a cluster of pins that traced the path of the IBM bandit. Indianapolis, Louisville, Cincinnati. The pins followed the interstates like a trail of breadcrumbs. He's using the highways as his veins, Duncan muttered to his colleagues, Joe Schley and Agent Freihofer. He jumps on the I-65 or the I-71, and he's gone before the first cruiser arrives. Duncan had a theory. The bandit wasn't just a criminal, he was a commuter. He was likely based in Indiana, traveling out to hit targets and returning to his safe zone. In 2003, Duncan launched Operation Intercept. He placed undercover officers inside 5 target banks. He coordinated with 1,200 officers across the city. The trap was set. On September 6th, the IBM Bandit struck hit number 35. The radio crackled. Operation Intercept. Operation Intercept. The call was too loud, too frantic. David Brankel, sitting in his BMW with the scanner hissing in his ear, heard the panic in the officer's voice. He didn't head for the interstate. He took the back roads. He slipped through the residential streets, weaving like a snake through the tall grass of the suburbs. Duncan watched the black sedan vanish on the horizon of his map. "He's gone," Duncan said, leaning back in his chair. "He's listening. He's always listening." Chapter 9, The Final Curb. Luck is a finite resource. For David Brankel, it ran out on a stretch of Highway 45 in December 2003. He was driving too fast. He was always driving too fast. He cut off a vehicle, nearly sending it into oncoming traffic. Unfortunately for Brankel, the man behind the wheel was Bloomington detective Kevin Hill. The chase that followed was a symphony of screaming tires and 100-mile-per-hour desperation. Brankel disregarded stop signs. He ran people off the road. He was a man who had built a life on the belief that he could never be caught. And now the reality was catching up in his rearview mirror. He escaped the immediate pursuit, but he left behind a clue. He had dropped his license. Days later, in Vincennes, the Indiana State Police surrounded a house at 1919 Hickory. Brankel tried to run one last time. He abandoned his young son in the car final, chilling testament to his narcissism, and fled on foot through an apartment complex. He tripped on a curb. The interstate bank mart bandit, the man who had hit 43 banks and stolen $136,000, fell face first into the dirt. As Sergeant Greg Winkler clicked the handcuffs into place, a small knife fell out of Brankel's pocket. It just fell out. Brankle stammered, the smooth businessman gone, replaced by a shivering, pathetic figure. I wasn't going to hurt you. Chapter 10, The Interrogation Room. The two worlds of deception met in the cold fluorescent light of an interrogation room. In one city, Gerald Barnbaum was being sentenced to 12.5 years, weeping about his prostate cancer and his grandchildren, even as the judge warned that he would do it all again if given a chance. In Vincennes, David Brankle sat across from Larry Duncan. I'm the guy you're looking for, Brankle said, leaning forward as if he were about to offer a business deal. I'm the IBM bandit. Call Louisville. Call Cincinnati. They'll want to talk to me. For 6 hours, Brankle talked. He told them about the first robbery. He told them about Donna. He told them about his mother, who told him he couldn't even mow the lawn right. He was a man who wanted to be the most successful bank robber of all time because he couldn't be anything else. He showed no remorse for the people he had cheated, the Sperrys, the Logans. He claimed he did legitimate work for them. He was a sociopath who had absolute no conscience. Chapter 11, The FBI's Doctor. Murray Konjovsky, an FBI agent, stared at the file on her desk in disbelief. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. The Bureau had a contract with a clinic in Los Angeles to perform employment physicals. For years, the man sitting in that office, the one who had checked the heartbeats and reflexes of over 100 FBI agents, was a man the government had already put behind bars. Gerald Barnbaum hadn't just fooled a clinic. He had fooled the premier investigative agency in the world. While the Bureau scrambled to assess the damage, Lisa Roberts sat in her living room, the space that used to be filled with the warmth of a loving husband. She now referred to him as the never was. I didn't know his real name, she whispered to the investigators. I didn't know his real age. Every night I shared a bed with a ghost. I trusted him with my life, my family, my future. Lisa realized that Barnbaum hadn't just stolen a name from a doctor in Stockton. He had stolen the years she could never get back. He had been a master of the mundane, playing the role of the devoted husband so convincingly that she never questioned why he never talked about his childhood or why he was so vague about his medical school days. Chapter 12, The Bus Ticket Blunder. In the world of bureaucracy, sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. After his 1996 conviction, Barnbaum was serving his time in a federal facility. In 2000, he was scheduled for a transfer because he had been categorized as a low-security inmate, a decision that baffled Agent Konjovsky. The Bureau of Prisons didn't use a secure transport. They gave Gerald Barnbaum a bus ticket. They told him to report to a facility in Illinois. Barnbaum took the ticket, walked out of the prison gates, and immediately vanished. He didn't go to Illinois. He went back to the only life he knew how to live. A month later, U.S. Marshal Joseph Exner walked into a North Hollywood clinic. He had a hunch. He didn't look for a man in a jumpsuit. He looked for a man in a lab coat. Gerald Barnbaum. Exner called out. A man stepped out of an exam room. He was wearing a crisp white coat, a stethoscope draped around his neck. He looked at the marshals and smiled that practiced clinical smile. You guys are good, Barnbaum said, turning around to be handcuffed. He had been back on the job for weeks, seeing patients, prescribing controlled substances, and collecting a paycheck as Dr. Gerald Barnes. He was 63 years old, and he was already planning his next comeback. Chapter 13, The $9 Million Lesson. The fallout from Barnbaum's final act at Executive Health Group was catastrophic. Carl Jansen, an executive at Atlantic Richfield, had been one of Dr. Barnes's patients. He had undergone a full physical, including a prostate exam performed by a man with no medical training. I saw him on the evening news the next day. Jansen recalled, the disgust still evident in his voice. Handcuffs. The evening news. I had trusted this man with my health, my privacy. Jansen wasn't alone. Nearly 500 former patients joined a civil lawsuit. The evidence revealed a shocking lack of diligence. Executive Health Group hadn't performed even a basic background check. If they had, they would have seen the multiple felony convictions and the trail of dead and duped patients. The company was forced to settle for over $9 million. It was a price paid for greed and negligence, and it put the firm out of business. But for the victims, the money didn't erase the feeling of being violated by an imposter. Chapter 14, The Pet Store Dream. While Barnbaum was a ghost in the clinic, David Brankel was a predator in the pet store. In Vincennes, Alan and Becky Logan were the embodiment of the American dream. They ran Logan's Wet Pets and More, a beloved local institution. They wanted to expand to build a family entertainment complex called Logan's Great Escape. When they met David Brankel, they thought their prayers had been answered. He looked like a gift from God, Becky remembered. He had the suits, the Vanguard Capital marketing materials, the timetables. He looked legit. Brankel charged them a $3,500 retainer and $500 a month. But his most chilling tactic involved his young son, Michael. On the first of every month, Brankel would walk into the pet store holding Michael's hand. He would have the boy hand the bill to Alan Logan. It was a prop, just like Barnbaum's stethoscope. The presence of the child created an atmosphere of trust, a sense that Brankel was a family man just like them. It's sad, Alan said years later, he used that boy to rob us. He had no conscience. Brankel was living a triple life, the devoted father in Vincennes, the entrepreneur in Bloomington, and the serial bank robber on the interstate. He was a sociopath who viewed people as meal tickets, and he didn't care who he stepped on to fund his dapper lifestyle. Chapter 15, The Last Act. In 2004, the curtain finally closed, at least for a while. David Brankel received 21 years in federal prison for 43 counts of bank robbery. Donna Hewins, the waitress who became his getaway driver, received house arrest and probation. Brankle owed $175,000 in restitution, but for the Logans and the Sperrys, not a dime would ever return. Brankle maintained to the end that his work for them was legitimate. In Minnesota, at Vasica Federal Prison, Gerald Barnbaum, now in his 70s, sat in his cell. This projected release was 2018. Investigators who had tracked him for decades were not under any illusions. His age won't make a difference, one detective noted. He's a very dangerous human being. When he walks through those doors, he will be a physician again. He doesn't know how to be anyone else. The architects of deception had been dismantled, but their legacy remained in the lives they shattered and the trust they broke. They were men who proved that in a world of credentials and suits, a mask can be more powerful than the truth. As long as there is greed, and as long as there is a desire to believe in the perfect professional, there will be men like Barnbaum and Brankle, waiting in the shadows, ready to put on the coat and start the show all over again. Chapter 16. The Stockton Surgeon. While Barnbaum was busy playing doctor in Southern California, the real Dr. Gerald Barnes was living a quiet, respected life in Stockton. He was an orthopedic surgeon with 37 years of dedicated service. He was a man who believed in the sanctity of the medical profession, a man whose name was synonymous with trust. The first blow came through a radio broadcast. His wife was driving to a nearby town when the news report broke. Dr. Gerald Barnes arrested and found guilty of manslaughter. Gerald, you wouldn't believe what I just heard. She had told him, her voice trembling. At first, the real Dr. Barnes was in a state of clinical shock. He couldn't wrap his mind around the logistics of it. How could someone simply walk into a clinic and pretend to be him? How could they use his years of schooling, his residency, his surgical expertise as a costume? The shock soon curdled into a cold, hard anger. As he delved into the wreckage, he realized the imposter hadn't just stolen his name, he had turned it into a weapon. It almost gets to the point where you become calloused, the real Dr. Barnes admitted. because it happened so often. It wasn't just the medical fraud. It was the identity theft opening accounts, buying cars in my name, forcing me to change my driver's license over and over again. For 2 decades, the real Dr. Barnes was shadowed by a ghost. Every time he thought the problem was resolved, every time Barnbound was put behind bars, the nightmare would resurface. He was a man caught in a Kafkaesque loop, fighting to prove that he was the good guy, while the bad guy wore his face and his credentials. In 1996, he traveled to the federal court to look his imposter in the eye. He saw a man crying about his own health, a man who had shown no such empathy for the patients he had misdiagnosed or the lives he had ended. I'm convinced, the judge said, that if I were to set you free, there is a 100% chance you would do this again. The real Dr. Barnes watched as Barnbound was led away in chains. He hoped it was finally over, but deep down, he knew the ghost was still out there, waiting for the next bus ticket. Chapter 17, The Art of the Note. David Brankel considered himself an artist, not of the canvas, but of the heist. While most bank robbers were chaotic and desperate, Brankel was surgical. He targeted banks inside grocery stores for a specific reason. They were located near major interstates, providing a quick exit, and the security was often less intense than at a standalone branch. His demand notes were his masterpieces. They were clean, concise, and printed on plain paper to avoid leaving fingerprints. This is a hold-up. I have a gun. Be calm. Both drawers. Be quiet. Go home alive. Detective Larry Duncan of Louisville studied these notes with the intensity of a linguist. He noticed the lack of spelling errors, the precise punctuation, the cold, professional tone. This wasn't the work of a drug-addicted amateur. This was a man who planned his crimes with the same attention to detail he supposedly gave his architectural projects. Brankel's method was simple. Hit a city, move to the next, and always stay near the interstate. He followed a pattern that Duncan eventually decoded by staring at maps and interstates. He's doing exactly what I'm doing, Duncan realized. He's sitting in front of a computer, looking for banks near highways. He's choosing his next target while I'm trying to predict it. It was a chess game played at 70 miles per hour. Branko was always one move ahead, listening to the police frequencies on his scanner, adjusting his route based on the frantic calls of the dispatchers. He was a man who thrived on the high rate of speed, both in his BMW and in his life. But in the end, it was a simple traffic violation, a moment of reckless driving on Highway 45 that brought the masterpiece to an abrupt and unglamorous end. The artist was caught because he forgot that even a ghost has to follow the rules of the road. Chapter 18, the never was and the always will be. For Lisa Roberts, the fallout wasn't just about the fraud, it was about the intimacy. She had shared a life with a man for over a year. She had made plans for children, for a private practice, for a future that was built on a foundation of lies. She looked at the photos of their wedding and saw a stranger in a doctor's suit. Who had I let share my life and my bed and my family? She asked. Who had I trusted? The man she knew as Dr. Gerald Barnes was a romantic. He brought flowers. He was a turn the girl right off her feet kind of man. He was everything she had ever wanted. But the reality was Gerald Barnbaum, a 62-year-old con man with a history of Medicaid fraud and manslaughter. He was a man who used her as a prop in his own domestic drama. A man who needed a doctor's wife to complete the image he wanted to project to the world. She realized that the likable little guy was a shell. There was no soul inside the lab coat, only a desperate need to be seen as someone important. He didn't just hurt patients. He hollowed out the people closest to him. Money, she said. Follow the money. It was always about the money for the never was, and for the companies that hired him. She became a vocal advocate for better background checks in healthcare, driven by the knowledge that her husband had treated over 100 FBI agents without anyone noticing he was a fraud. She wanted to ensure that no other woman and no other patient would ever be fooled by a ghost in a white coat. Chapter 19, The Echo of John Mackenzie. The most tragic legacy of Gerald Barnbaum wasn't the stolen money or the corporate bankruptcies. It was a 4-year-old girl named Jill. In 1979, John Mackenzie was just 29 years old. He was a man with a lot of life ahead of him, a man who loved his daughter and worked hard to provide for her. He walked into a clinic with a treatable condition and walked out with a death sentence signed by an imposter. He was a nice young man, his family recalled. He and Jill had that taken away. Everything they could have been together was stolen. Jill grew up without a father because a man named Gerald Barnbaum wanted to play a role. She lived with the knowledge that his death was senseless, a result of a system that allowed a fraud to rise to the level of medical director without a single verification of his credentials. For Rick D'Alessandro, the image of John Mackenzie on the kitchen floor was the fuel that kept him fighting. He was the one who blew the whistle in 1979, and he was the one who blew it again